Welcome back to Dead Good Book Reviews. I'm Judith and you're watching another episode of Overbooked here on the channel. This is the series where I review every single book on my shelves because I just love fairy tales so gosh darned much. Today we will be talking about the Once Upon a Season anthologies, at least the first two. Please excuse any background noise. I have the windows open because it is way too hot and people are flying planes overhead. What can you do? Some quick disclaimers before we start. I bought both of these books myself. I am friends with one of the authors who has written stories for both and will be editing them going forward, Adie Hart. However, nobody's paying me to promote this series. I'm doing it because I like them. And all opinions are my own. Nobody is handing me packets of money or chocolate bars to promote this series. I don't think you can spoil a short story anthology, but if you do want to go into these knowing absolutely nothing about any of the stories, click away now. And I will link the story graph below in case you want to check out the series as a whole. I don't think anyone's put any content warnings on there, but they might in the future and therefore I will link it. This is a collection of fairy tale, folklore and mythology inspired short stories written by a number of indie authors. The first one came out in 2021 and Once Upon a Summer came out just a few weeks ago in June of 2023. I don't know if you can guess, but there are future anthologies planned. They're not just going to do winter and summer and move on with their lives. As far as I'm aware, anyway. These anthologies are collated by H.L. Macfarlane. I've not read any of their other stuff before, but that is the person behind the anthology. It's really hard to talk about short story collections like this without just describing everything that I can remember about them, and we all know my memory's not that good, so I'm going to try and talk about this in broad terms. I think this is a really good mix of stories, especially when you combine the two books together. It's a really good blend of more poetical, kind of shorter works, longer, cosy, romantic fantasy vibes, dark, brooding fantasy vibes. It's all in there, and I think not only is that really refreshing just to read because you're not getting bogged down in one particular thing, but also it's very reflective of the original theme. We have some fairy tales that are very much geared towards young children that are perhaps more cosy. There are fairy tales that are in a more poetic style. There are fairy tales that are just cozy romances. I really feel like the collection of stories itself reflects the breadth of the theme. I'll be really interested to see whether that continues to be true in future anthologies, but so far I'm really pleased with the variety of stories that you get in this kind of collection. In terms of the actual stories, I will say my friends' stories are my favourite in both of these. Adie Hart's cozy fantasy romance short stories, Fairytale-Inspired. The first one is Princess and the Pea, very loosely inspired. The second one is Goose Girl retelling. They are my absolute favourites. I am biased, but also they are really, really good. I will say I also really enjoyed Josie Jaffrey's stories in both of these, which I've talked about Josie on the channel before, primarily writes amazing vampire books. There were a lot of other stories I enjoyed, but those were the ones that really stuck with me. Those and I couldn't remember what it was called. The Last Roses of Summer by Kate Longstone in Once Upon a Summer was a fantastic, dark, murdery kind of story that really tickled my fancy. It was just what I wanted at that moment. So I'm going to shout that one out as well. Really good. Overall, I would say I liked more of the stories than I didn't like, which is kind of my metric for was this anthology good or not, because you're never going to like everything. If you're like me and you read virtually no indie or self-published books, it's just not something that I've ever really had an in with. I've never really got into doing it. I'd like to do it more. This is a great in. You've got loads of names all in one little book. It's a fantastic package. It does have that feeling of the kind of thing where later on you'll read a book by someone and realise their short story was featured in one of these books. It just has the vibe of that to me. In terms of the cons of this review, usual short story collection stuff. I think it's always going to be a bit of a mixed bag and it will depend what you particularly like and don't like in short stories. I am not a huge short story reader and I got on with this well. I think the fact that they differed in length as well as tone really helped with that for me, just kept it feeling very varied. But if you were going to read this, I would say, as usual, do as I say, not as I do, and read it more slowly than I do. Read one a day or something similar. You're not having to make review videos, so you don't have to move at my pace. I wasn't surprised to have not liked some of the stories, because typically, for me, I like anthologies with multiple authors less than I like single author anthologies. However, getting to read stories by the same author across two books was actually very interesting, and it was cool to look back and realise which authors I'd liked one story and not the other, or where I'd enjoyed both of them, or where they completely shifted in their themes. I thought that was really interesting. I think you can definitely feel the influence of the first book on the second. I actually don't think that's a bad thing at all. The second book definitely feels more sapphic, which I think is definitely a result of the first book's having some really good sapphic stories in it. That is no downside on my book. I think it's going to be very cool to see where these authors grow across the anthologies. Very fascinated to see what happens by kind of the fourth book. You're getting to see these people grow and influence each other, and there's obviously a mixing of conversations about their works together. I just find it very cool. I think it's a great project. Some comparisons, some other things you might want to read. Obviously there are more anthologies in this series to come, so keep an eye on the McLantern social media, website, etc. for when those will be coming out. If you want more indie stories, I recommend Indie Bites, which is a little magazine where you can read short stories on a theme. A lot of these authors have featured in Indie Bites. Again, I have a connection to the people who write it, but I'm not being paid to promote it. And as always, I draw a blank on short story collections because I don't read very many of them. If you've read short story collections that you love, particularly if they're multi-author, plonk those down in the comments below. I would love to hear your suggestions. Equally, if you've read these or any books or stories by any of the authors, please do let me know. I will have the full list of authors in the description below. While you're down there commenting, if you haven't already, please do subscribe. It makes me feel loved and appreciated. You can also follow me on social media. Come hang out on Discord where we have chill chats about books. I'd like to say a huge thank you to all the ghosts who haunt me over on Patreon. They support the channel and in return get early access to videos, bonus content, live streams and more. If you'd like to join their number, that's linked below as well. Thank you so much for watching. That's all from me and I will see you in the next one. It's gonna be some bloopers now. Today we will be talking some quick disclaimers before we start. They both fell down. Well, oh jeebs. I'm not being paid. They're being attacked. I think the fact that they lifted in depth, you're not having to make review videos, so you don't need to move at my face.